Sorry about that. So that's happening. Yeah. And that was one of the reasons that we ended up making a transition back to Indiana. Like Paul said, we're in the Indianapolis area now. We love Nashville. This gave us a reason to come back and brought the kids down. We trick-or-treated last night with some friends here. And when I told my kids what I was doing today, they said, you're going to be up there talking for like 30 minutes? Like, you might want to break that up with like some songs or something. I love the idea. They specifically requested the Monster Mash. I'm going to spare you from that today. So, but I thought that was fun. So as a company, this is me and Mark, and then our most recent hire earlier this year is Isaiah. Mark and Isaiah are in Austin, Texas. They are we connected through the same MBA program. After I did music for a number of years, went through an MBA program, and came back to Nashville and worked with a private equity group. So I was basically doing due diligence on different businesses that thought they wanted to raise money, but really what 9 times out of 10, it felt like in talking and sitting down with the business owners, they really just wanted help. They kind of hit their ceiling of what they knew to do when they looked at the numbers of their business. And they'd seen Shark Tank, so they thought, maybe raising money is what I need to do. But they didn't also, at the same time, there's a tension because they didn't want to just give away part of their business just to bring in money. So what I found was a handful of these business owners really just wanted guidance, and they just wanted really the same kinds of questions about what's the potential of this business, what levers can we pull, what decisions can we make to improve the future, the growth plan for this business. So that kind of opened the door for us to start Amplify and begin certain businesses. So our mission as a business is to help companies achieve their why sooner. It's a funny place to start when we're talking about data and numbers, but we know that understanding numbers and having a clear picture of what's happening, how the gears are turning within the business, that's a really powerful thing, and it has to be aligned with something much bigger than just greater efficiency and more money and all this stuff. It's got to be aligned with the why of the business. So we like to connect the vision piece, kind of the heartbeat of the business, with the operations and financial pieces as well, just to make sure everything is moving in the same direction. So here's kind of what we're going to be talking through for the next 20 minutes. Why is this important? We'll get into kind of a core business model picture and what some of those key variables that affect profitability for your business might be. Not all of them may apply to your business. It depends. A lot of companies we work with are consumer good, physical product, e-commerce companies. So I know there's some different types of businesses in here. So and then there's Paul mentioned this download page that you can go and access some of these sheets. I'll make sure that that the link to the profit calculator that we developed, it's a spreadsheet that you can get in and plug in some numbers and just play with some variables, basically. I'll make sure that that's in there as well. And then kind of the bigger picture, next steps. So Phil Knight, founder of Nike, he talks about, I won't read this word for word, but he basically talks about how just like blood for living as a human is important, it's not the end goal. That's not our purpose as humans, is to produce blood. It's just part of helping us. It's means to a greater end. Same way that money and cash to a business is means to that greater end. It helps accelerate the progress toward whatever flag in the distance you say is important. The goals, even the checkpoints along the way. So even what goals are we trying to measure? Through these Google tools that tell us that we're on the right track. Money can provide the opportunity to either accelerate, or it can actually get in the way. Lack of money can get in the way of making these improvements to the business model that we want to make. So cash concerns, like who has ever worried about cash? Anybody? Like very normal part of running a business. So there's just a variety of questions around, like, when can I hire the next person? When can I, when can I invest in rebuilding my website? Like, when can I do that? Like, what has to happen, for me to ultimately be able to get paid the amount that I really want to get paid, or when can I get the business to the point where we're able to expand into a new facility, or my spouse can quit working, and all that kind of stuff. There are so many lingering questions that can keep us up at night. And the reason, again, this is important, is what I want you to walk away from, after today is really at least an understanding of what things impact the money that comes in. So think top line revenue, and then what things can I control that may accelerate, those goals that were kind of listed on the previous page. So the goal here is to get as much money from the top line to the bottom line. So we think of this core business model when we want to understand, and again, this is in some ways putting on that investor background hat that is kind of looking at what is the potential of this business model. We want to get a snapshot of what think of a single month of a business might look like, and within an overall revenue number is really, it's made up of smaller building blocks. It's made up of individual transactions or specific products being sold, or a certain number of consulting agreements that get added, or it could be a variety of different things. It could be busloads of people being transported. So the two big questions that we want to be thinking through today are, what is the profit potential of my business, and then what can I do to improve it? So here are the 6. And the main thing, we'll drill down into each of them in more detail, but the main thing that I want to express to you in this is that a lot of times I found in talking to a lot of business owners that there's a vague feeling that I'm somehow not running my business as well as I could, right? There's like a right way to do it, and I haven't figured that out. And the reality is, with each of these variables, there's so much trial and error involved. So first of all, don't beat yourself up if you feel like, oh, I've never even heard of one of these terms, or I don't know how to even think about this. There's a lot of, I found in talking to business owners, there's a lot of embarrassment and shame sometimes about, like, I don't understand numbers like I feel like I should. I've got people looking at me for guidance, and I've got investors and stakeholders thinking that I know what I'm doing, and I'm really guessing. At the end of the day, there is a lot of freedom to try and test and make small improvements that, in combination together, can have a big impact on the financial outcome of your business. So it's okay if you've never thought through some of these things, especially if you're just starting out. There's a lot of room to try certain things and not be afraid that it's going to have some crazy catastrophic result as you grow your business. So just like Paul was talking about with A/B testing to certain things, we all said, except for one person, we all said, let's talk. Like, that's the button that works. Certainly, duh, right? Why are you even asking that question? And then we pull up the numbers, and I love that. It's like, oh my goodness. So there are a lot of things in our business like that we whether it was a decision made 10 weeks ago or 10 years ago, there's so many habits and ways that we do things that we just assume that they're the best way of doing things. So without constantly testing and trying different things, we never find those little improvements. So let's jump into these. And even if you've been around, if your company is 30 years old or 3 months old, these fundamentals are always worth examining and coming back to, because this is really the basics of what drives the health and really the future potential of your business. Just as an example of this is kind of like your let's talk button. Here, just as a quick overview, we won't get into great detail here, but a company A, B, and C, a handful of these variables are kind of listed out here. The average order value of each transaction, the cost of goods that are part of making up that, the units that were in that transaction, the cost of sales, and the resulting margin per order, the number of potential customers in the market, like a lot of variables. And in isolation, the highlighted cells are really, if you're just looking at average order value, well, bigger's better, right? And cost of goods, a lower percent cost of goods is better, or lower dollar value, all these things. But then you get down to the end, and the way they've all worked together, company C is actually, maybe through that growth potential or future potential lens, that's the one that is going to spit off the most money. And so I just show you this as kind of that let's talk or request a quote button. It can sometimes, we can hone in on trying to improve, one thing in isolation and miss the benefit of all things kind of working together. That's really where the magic is where they all work together. So I'm going to talk through each one and give a client example. Some of them you may have heard of, because a lot of these companies are national based. So the average order value, we think of that as really the total number of, if it's a goal, it's like somebody checked out on the web page. And the ways that we can improve that and make that go up is we can think about, what am I charging for my service or my product? Is there opportunity to increase the price? I don't know. Maybe somebody can chime in here. How have you decided on pricing, like for the kids' clothing? Like, how have you decided on the price that you charge for the products?
Well, mostly they have the vendors we have will recommend, so that's where we're starting at.
Yeah. Great. That's a great answer. A lot of times it's, well, I saw this person doing it this way, or there's some benchmark that somebody gave me, or I just guessed, or this is what somebody offered to pay for it, or they negotiated me to this point. There are a lot of ways, and even just within the pricing lever, that in and of itself can have a huge impact on the free cash that a business can generate. Because just on one side of one end of the spectrum, if you're selling a gallon of milk or something, then there's only so much that you can kind of play with that price because it's more of a commodity. But on the other end, if you're a one-of-a-kind product or service, like you can think more of what's the value to the customer that I can explore. What are they willing to pay? What's the value of this to them? So there are a lot of questions around there. And getting specific with the price piece, Ranger Station is a candle company here, or a fragrance company here in Nashville. And what we found was, they're selling a candle for $28, which is still more than I probably paid for a candle personally. But what we found is that some of the competitors were up in the $40-something range. And they had this feeling that we're missing out on some revenue here, some cash flow here. And so we were able to work with the web developer and test different price points. And we found that even in raising the price, the demand didn't change at all. So all of a sudden, our average value per order went up 32%. And that's just extra money coming in the business that makes a huge difference. So again, accelerating kind of the progress of the business, the growth of the business, pulling that lever made a huge impact. Also, what ways can you upgrade or add on or bundle whatever you're offering? How can you increase the value or the perceived value of what you're offering people? And additionally, helping them get above something like a shipping threshold of like, hey, if you spend over $75, you're gonna get free shipping here. Well, that incentivizes them to add that extra thing and get that benefit. Also urgency, like, hey, this offer is gonna end. The Black Friday sale is about to end. You better check out. So the next one is cost of goods. So it depends on your business model. This if you're selling a physical product, it's the materials that go into it. If you're transporting people on a bus, it's how much did it cost to pay the driver and fuel and the use of the bus and all that stuff. So understanding what it costs to actually deliver the value is a huge piece of the building block. When we think of the total revenue that comes in the business, we have to be clear on what it costs to fulfill on delivering that value to the customer. And just some quick examples of ways that cost of goods can be reduced. We want this to be, there are a couple of ways we can make the margin bigger. One is to increase the price with the same product, and the other is to find cheaper materials potentially, hopefully not affecting the value of what's being delivered, but other ways that, ordering in bulk. If you're going to order 50 units instead of 5, there may be a discounted price on some of that. If you're producing your own products, you can leverage the system that you're using to produce products, and if you do it more efficiently, you get more product out of the same amount of cost, basically. And then the last thing here, Banjo Ben Clark, he's a banjo player. He played with Taylor Swift for a long time. He has a website where you can buy a banjo, but you can also subscribe to his banjo lessons. And when you compare the two, the dollar that comes in for somebody signing up to take a lesson is worth a whole lot more to the bottom line of the business than a dollar that goes toward buying a banjo or strings or whatever, because the cost of producing it has been incurred already, and all of a sudden, it's almost all margin for somebody to subscribe to that video. And so in looking at that and helping the customer that comes to the website see that if I'm coming, I'm gonna spend $500 on Benjamin's website, if we can bring them to the point where they're buying, $250 in physical products and $250 in digital products, then the cost of goods gets drastically reduced in that. So we basically are increasing the profit that comes when we look at the lifetime value of these customers.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And we talk about this a lot in our class, but if you do digital work, what are some unexpected, because a lot of times people think that they're bottom line, like they have zero costs, but you sell like internet and other things. Like, what are some things people should consider if they don't have a physical product, it's a digital product, but they're still trying to figure out how to market it?
Absolutely. So that actually goes pretty well into this next piece. Yeah, look, it's like we're working together here. Well, so understanding the sunk investment to like, if let's just say you're recording a video course, and then you're going to sell access to it, just as an example. So you have to know how much it costs to create it in the first place, and that's kind of the sunk investment. And really, let's just say it costs $3,000 to produce it. You're selling each one for $300. Then you're thinking about the break-even number of, I just have to sell 10 of these classes to break even, and then from there, that's gravy, right? It's all just extra money coming in. I don't have to do anything except just kind of handle some administrative stuff. But to maybe get to that 10 number, it's no longer like a physical material that gets incurred with every person that signs up for that video course. It's more, what are the fees associated with selling that? What are the, like if we are going to market it and try to get 100 people to come sign up for this, what's the cost of acquiring that new customer? Because it's no longer the physical materials, but it's we might be spending, and this is where somebody like Paul and his team is so critical, is having somebody understand what we can actually spend to acquire. So we might be able to set a target that says, I'm willing to spend $100 to sell a $300 course, because even though I make only $200 instead of $300, I'm able to generate, far and above that break even, and I build a new asset, which is a relationship with a customer that the next course I put out, I can just email them directly and maybe not incur that same expense. And with the digital, I mean, there shouldn't be any shipping costs necessarily, but it really is with something like that. What we've seen is primarily if there are fees to a platform, if there's any administrative cost of just handling and kind of overseeing the delivery of that, and if there's a platform cost of just hosting the videos or something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's right.
So the peach truck, you guys like the peaches? Do you know the peach truck? Familiar with them here? So we worked with them last summer, and they were trying to build their customer base. They know that when they start that new relationship with a customer, people like me start to view early May as like starting to get warm. The peach truck starts showing up and selling peaches. That marks the beginning of summer. And so I get the email, I get a box of peaches shipped up to Indiana, or show up when they're selling peaches. And what became important with their goal to grow their kind of Harry and David type fruit box, you're gonna get it showing up to your door. What was important was that we got super clear on how much margin we had to play with. So, okay, there's a cost of peaches, there's a cost of shipping, there's a cost of the box and all that stuff. And when we subtract that from the revenue, if they're selling a box for $40 or something, and $20 or $25 of that is made up of the peaches and all that stuff, then okay, we've got $15 or $20 to play with, to throw at these advertising efforts to build a new relationship, because we knew that when we start a new relationship, the lifetime value is worth far more than that first transaction. And that's important to know what your lifetime value is of a customer that you're serving, because it informs how much we should be willing to spend to initiate that relationship. But if we're guessing, you can just imagine where that leads. I mean, just because it might feel good, we spent $5,000 this month on ads and we brought in $4,000 of revenue. The math doesn't add up. And so getting clear on what we could actually spend to acquire these customers allowed us to take their their direct-to-consumer channel of the business up into the 7 figures and triple it what they were doing the previous year. So it's an important lever to be able to pull, because it tells us whether it's, I use an example of a transaction, but if your goal is, I want people to get on the phone and call to learn more. Like there's something in between somebody never knowing that you exist to them giving you money. And there's a customer journey that they go through. And what's important is you may know what the value is when they cross the finish line and they become a customer. But what's important to understand is in the checkpoints along that journey, that you know what a single phone call is worth, because for every 10 calls that we get, we have 2 people go to this next phase and we get a contract, and for every 2, then one of them signs it. And all that stuff is so important because it informs and it helps everybody. I imagine your life is a lot easier when the marketing budget is not a guess or even a fixed number. That's one thing that is so frustrating to me sometimes is just seeing that a number gets set at the beginning of the year for marketing or sales efforts, and it's not tied to a dynamic, responsive process that allows for deviating or increasing that because we know that it's working well or that there's a return on the invested dollars that are going into the business. So a lot of times putting the marketing efforts in context of the vision and showing what happens to the operations of the business, the ripple effects with growth, pulling that all together, I've seen it over and over, it frees up new resources because all of a sudden people go, oh, we like what's happening here. Like, this is pretty cool. And growth is no longer as scary or ambiguous because it's possible to know and kind of predict what happens if revenue goes up here. We might have to hire this person. And here's the cash in the bank in 6 months that we should expect. So just a quick kind of zoom back out. So these are the three variables that we've talked about so far: average order value. From there, we can subtract the cost of goods and cost of sales. And what I want you to see with those two examples is these two expense examples is that those are the variable costs. So we think of variable costs and then fixed costs. And the variable ones are the costs that change with the number of transactions that we incur. So, the materials we're only going to spend more, or we're only going to spend more on marketing as we bring in new revenue. Whereas if, as we get to the next section, with fixed period costs, those don't change 1 month to the next depending on how much business we do. It's like, okay, our rent is going to be, like even this building here, they're going to pay a certain amount this month and next month, regardless of how much revenue they bring in as a business. And so the fixed costs are ones that it's kind of like, we think of it as kind of the hurdle that we have to clear every month. So every month it's like the cost of just running the system and just, it's kind of the rent that we pay to have a system that creates value. And so then the goal every month is, what do we need to do from a sales standpoint and create enough margin to more than offset that? Because profit shows up when we basically go above and beyond the fixed period costs. So a few practical ways to improve kind of overhead. Obviously, the lower the overhead that we have is it's easier and easier to cover every month. So some ways that we've seen our clients make improvements here, they are moving from variable to fixed incentives, or variable versus fixed incentives just basically means if somebody is on the team doing a job, if we can have some flexibility there. For instance, like we have a salesperson with one of our companies who it's a full commission opportunity. So we're not taking on some big salesperson base pay as we're building out this sales effort, because it's just too risky for where the business is at to take on that much more overhead. So we've positioned it as full commission, and the money only goes out as new revenue comes in, if that makes sense. Also, flexible square footage. We have some companies that have their rent grow with their needs. So they're in a space where, depending on how much square footage they're using, they're in a position where they can grow but not take on this whole space's overhead if we only need half of it for the next 3 months. Outsourcing roles, cut use services. So it's just about being intentional. All these examples are really just about examining how the inner workings of the business are functioning. And then again, just helping your team be as efficient as possible, because the more efficient people who are on salary can be, basically the greater the potential of the system is. So this example, Full Red Cycling, it's a studio here in Nashville. One of the things that we found was we didn't have clear optics. Does everybody have like a bookkeeper or use QuickBooks? Or, and that may be a basic question, but not every business that we've worked with has had good financials. And Kinsey was in a position where she was spending 4 to 6 hours of her time every month just trying to organize that stuff. And that's an inefficiency of one of the key resources of the business that we want to make sure is not being spent focusing on the wrong thing. So efficiency of people is an important way to basically improve the overall system. So again, coming back to this break-even kind of mindset of how many units would we need to sell, orders would we need to have to break even on a $10,000 a month overhead cost, then we get clear on like, okay, that's 200 orders. So the 201st order is the one that puts more money in the bank than we started with, right? So so there are two more here. Organic sales, the content piece of what Paul was talking about is huge here because we want to maximize the number of relationships and transactions that can come in without us having to shell out money to make money, basically. So that can be through things like blog content. For Recycled Firefighter, one of our clients, we found that, okay, these email blasts that you're sending out every 2 weeks, it's working really well. What's stopping you from sending out an email every week to your base audience? And it's those simple questions of this is just how we've always done it, right? There are these kind of fixed mindset ways of running your business that you can forget about the power of some really just simple but intentional steps that can be taken, like sending out more emails. And over last year, I mean, we saw, we were investing more in digital marketing, so revenue was coming out through that channel, but because of some intentional things that we were doing on the organic side, the organic revenue was growing twice as fast as basically the paid acquisition. So it's the reason that matters is there's no cost of sales associated with somebody clicking through an email and buying. They didn't click a paid ad, so it's a lot more overall. That order is going to be a lot more profitable for the business than if every single order that's coming through for a new onesie, is going to be through paid ads. That's an expensive way because you're giving up part of the margin for every order. So also partnerships and working with people who have an audience and like what you do. I don't know if you guys work with influencers ever, but if there are people who have an Instagram following and it's a new mom and they love organic clothing for their kids, and there are ways to align that may not cost as much to get in front of an audience that you have a good feeling is predisposed to like what you do. So the last one, capacity and volume. So then I mentioned you do 200 orders and then the 201st sends more money to the bank. You have to know what you can handle as a business. So if you can only handle 180 orders a month, whether you're producing the product or fulfilling on that level, you're gonna have a hard time breaking even because your capacity is below what needs to happen to break even. So knowing what your system's potential is to actually produce and fulfill is important because that kind of becomes a ceiling. And so this final lever that can be pulled is we can do more orders. Like we can send more in this 30-day period where we're paying these fixed period costs. We can send more orders through it, and that's how we get 201, 220, 300, and we get to the place where we're putting far more money, far more dollars into the bank account at the end of the month. So, example here is a swimwear company that we work with who had very, very little constraint on what they could do from the creation of product. They had over-ordered, this is before we worked with them, they had over-ordered a lot of product, and so we had a big pile that we were able to basically look at the digital marketing agency that we're working with, and we could say, look, we're ready to go if you guys can find the audience. We're not gonna run out of stock here. What can we do to not liquidate this, but just push the gas? Like, let's send more through our monthly system by increasing our marketing dollars and just having more and more transactions in a limited period of time. So we were able to bring up their e-com revenue to between 4 and 5 times what it was just a few months earlier, which was really exciting. And that was, again, this is all just by stepping back and looking at like all the variables and how they're currently working and understanding what can be improved as a whole, like what can be improved overall that can allow for that end goal of more money in the bank. Who wants more money in the bank? Probably everybody in the bank. Just wanted to ask. So this, I'm not going to get into the spreadsheet right now, but there will be a link and a kind of a video tutorial that you'll be able to walk through and actually play with some of your own numbers here, because I know it's like I'm talking about all these hypothetical things, and it's like, how in the world am I going to apply all this stuff? These visuals are really trying to answer that question of if I have this average order value and this is my cost of goods, variable cost to produce, and this is what I'm paying to acquire a sale. Here are my monthly fixed costs. Here's how much of my sales is organic, meaning I'm not having to pay to acquire. It's like all those things. That's going to populate this table in these visuals, and it's going to show us, well, here's how many orders you need to do to be profitable. And then down here, well, here's my target for next month. What if I did 320 orders? What would that look like? And this shows that combination of organic or just fully ad-driven or blended or all these things. The video explains in more detail. So I want to give you guys access to that, because otherwise it's kind of hard to walk away from this conversation and apply it. So what we talked about so far, and about to wrap up, but what we talked about so far is a snapshot. So it's kind of looking at a month, but as everybody knows, the timing of when you have to pay for a new order of inventory and when you get paid from certain customers, like it doesn't always cleanly just line up within a 30-day period. That's not real life. So life is a lot messier than that. And so what's important is to at least get an understanding of how, and this is kind of what I was describing, sometimes the cash doesn't, it's not like it all just arrives in one kind of like snapshot. It's like, no, there's a time component to this. So what's important then is to get an understanding of what a single month, like what the cash flow timing looks like over time, and then begin to layer month after month and understand, okay, as we make these improvements, here's when we will see the benefit of it. So, and then here's what we expect to kind of see this compounding impact over time. And so ultimately then that gets into, I mentioned QuickBooks, and it ultimately gets into what you're probably familiar with looking at already on a monthly or quarterly basis with the profit and loss statements and the cash flow statements and the balance sheet, all these, really exciting things that your bookkeeper sends you every month. But really, that's the practical application. This is the proof of the changes that you are making on these small little building block levels that then add up to make an impact on the monthly, quarterly, annual level. And so the next steps, basically, I want you to download the calculator. You'll see the link here in the next week on Paul's page, and just play with numbers. Again, don't pressure yourself with thinking there's a right way or a perfect way to do any of this, because it is a lot of trial and error. But in examining the different parts of how money flows to the business and how it connects to, building an audience and converting people on a website and paying for new customers to come in and so you can deliver value to them. My guess is that in examining that, you're going to maybe identify a thing or two that you feel like, well, why are we doing it? Why are we pricing it this way? Or I wonder if there's a cheaper supplier that wouldn't affect the quality of what we're doing, but would help us improve things. Or I wonder if there's a more efficient way that our site could get people through to schedule phone calls. Or how much should we be spending for every phone call that gets booked? Like just examining this will hopefully reveal some opportunities for you to make some of those small improvements. And then again, tying the targets and applying time to this. So understanding even the seasonality of every business is going to be a little bit different. So for a lot of physical product companies, going into Q4 is a really exciting time because people are buying gifts for each other, and it's an important time to know like what's about to happen is not probably going to also happen in February. So we got to prepare for that from a cash flow standpoint and inventory standpoint, and understanding kind of how the snapshot turns into this moving picture with seasonality in the forecast. And then the understanding your system and what could our current team do? Like what can my current business actually handle? Like where is the bottleneck that if we did grow and if we doubled in size, where would we break? Like what would fall apart? Identifying that, again, alleviates some of the ambiguous fear or concern around growth that we can often have. Just knowing that, oh, okay, we're probably in a position where we could, really the bottleneck is, it could be cash, it could be a team member, it could be on the sales side, it could be, we've got the system, we just need more people to talk to. So it could be on the sales side. And then tying that vision piece into it. Looking ahead and saying, if we do these things, if we do X, Y, and Z, how does that get us closer to what we say matters most in the end? Money is just means to something bigger. It represents some opportunity to take the next step in the business, and making these small improvements in context of the bigger why or bigger vision helps us stay focused on what matters. Otherwise, we hone in and think what's most important is one metric. What Paul and his team walked through, it's like there are all these different metrics that together they make sense. Together they're important. But if you just focus on this one and trying to make that as perfect as possible, you could accidentally miss out on a lot of opportunity, because maybe the thing that matters most isn't the time on your site or page views. Maybe it's the language on the click button, whatever it is. So just always keeping a view of where you're at, decisions you're making in context of your bigger business picture. So, and then tracking progress and troubleshooting, doing the A/B tests and trying at the different price point, not being afraid to risk that. And then if it didn't work, we can always go back. Like not feeling like anything that you're about to do is going to be so permanent that you can't undo it or try the next test. So that pretty much sums up everything I wanted to share with you guys today. So I know I covered a lot, but the main thing I want you to take away is don't be afraid to try and test little things in your business, pay attention to those 6 variables, and if you keep focused on the fundamentals, that will begin to compound and multiply and make more progress than anything else on the big picture journey that you're on. So.
All right, questions for Ben? I got a few, but you guys start.
Yes.
What's the smallest company you would
Sorry?
engage? What's the smallest company you would engage?
We just last week signed on with a boot company here in town who is pre-revenue. They sometimes we have people come to us who say, we need help crafting a growth plan. And sometimes that's because they want to get better themselves. Sometimes it's because they have an investor asking to see projections. And we, again, with my background in private equity, we can step in and even out of, we actually have 2 companies in the last 2 weeks that we signed on with who are really just needing to start with a blank spreadsheet and go, okay, here's what we think our overhead is going to be. Here's what we think it's going to cost us to acquire a customer. And it's maybe speculation right now, but it's important for them to get a picture of when everything's up and running. Here are the sunk costs to build out our space, to hire this person. There's value there as well, even if there's no existing data to start out with.
How do you price your services?
So we just do a flat monthly fee with people. We view businesses like it's relationships. So I don't like an hourly thing. I also don't like, we've had people say, well, why don't you, if you're helping these companies grow, why don't you have like a fee and then some percent of like the growth? And it's like, that exposes the business owner to some unknown amount of money. It feels like, oh, you know my numbers better than I do, and you're presenting this thing where it looks like you're gonna win. Like, not that there's no way that can be a friendly thing, but we have landed at the spot where just for the last few years we've always just had a fixed monthly amount, and we have weekly check-ins, and some weeks are more hours than others, but it all plays out in the end.
Awesome. Anybody else have questions for either Alan, Ben, myself? One of the things, so I'll say this about Ben. I think that I haven't seen many people at all like offer the services that you're offering in the way that you're offering them. You can see how he understands the piece of what data-driven design does, like agencies like data-driven design. Like, he greatly understands that piece, which I think that's your differentiator from like others that are offering the outsourced CFO, COO service, because you can see those things and make those recommendations. But I also really like you can also see that so there's overlap nicely with what businesses need related to all of our services, and how willing you are to come and talk and help. Really appreciate you coming and talking and helping everybody out. I think it's super valuable. And you can see that like there's stuff that he does that like we just will never do. Like, it's just like, we're not going to be able to like help you price out your products. You know what I mean? Like, we can run the A/B test that you're talking about. But like we're staying far away from those kinds of business decisions. But I really like all of what you do and how I think you go like way over into the space that's way more valuable than just kind of somebody who is going to help you with your books or look at your profit margin or like, and then like non-intimidating way that you do it is really awesome. So thanks for coming out, Ben, and thank you everybody for all your time. It's really awesome. So like Ben said, we'll have everything on the website, small business website, workshop.com, and then email me directly or Sonia or Alan, and we'll get you anything you need from today. And thanks again for coming out. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, of course.
the marketing side. I don't like touching that because I describe it as the equivalent of waking up each day and my spreadsheet works a little bit differently than maybe it did the day before.
Yeah.
And there are like shifts and like algorithms change.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
like I
Yeah,
can't do that.
that's pretty crazy. You're like, yeah, it's highly dependent on Google and Facebook and